Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing fine. You say it's Julian Darius, but you only think it's Julian Darius. It may or may not be a simulacra.
That's right. We are just an AI at this point, reporting from the... I'm actually just drinking tea and reporting from the afterlife. Yes, we are on to season 2, and we are going to be starting with the episode 1, Be Right Back, which, let's be fair, sounds like it should be a parody of a sci-fi, a slasher film. So, as always, spoiler alert, we're going to spoil the hell out of these, so there's obviously all the twists and that sort of thing. But this one, starring a couple of faces that have made their way to quite a lot of other things. Hayley Atwell and Domhnall Gleeson, most notably. After learning about a new service that lets people stay in touch with the deceased, a lonely, grieving Martha reconnects with her late lover. Is the short blurb I have here. So, let's get into it. So, Julian, first thoughts then about Be Right Back.
This starts slow, but I think it's very good. In fact, I think it is the best of the season. An entire history of you, we agreed was the best of the previous season, and that it kind of ramped up. For me, this one starts with its best episode. But I think it is a little bit of a slow burn, that it sort of is a story that basically succeeds because it just keeps going on, the way we both kind of like stories that keep going on and sort of show you, oh, okay, what happens next.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think?
No, I agree. I do like this one. I think I have problems with the start of it. I think that's the one thing I have, is you say it's a slow burn, and I don't mind a slow burn. I kind of like that, when that pace is needed, then I think it can work incredibly well. The biggest problem I have with this episode is the relationship between the two main characters at the beginning of the episode, Hayley Atwell and Domhnall Gleeson, who plays her husband. That's Martha and Ash. Is that there's not enough there that you have this sort of like, what I can see what they're trying to do is to sort of play them off as they're very comfortable with each other, and she gets sort of like, frustrated with his sort of like, his obsession with social media, and he's obviously lost a child at some point, and there's just other stuff. But like, it doesn't feel like a relationship that would cause this level of grief that she feels afterwards. Now, that's obviously, so all people are different, but like, I don't know, it doesn't feel like if you were to take this, the first part of this, and just play it to people and say, tell me how long these two people have been together. And she says, obviously, she actually says 10 years at one point, but take that out and just show their actions. Like, they could have been together for a couple of months or a couple of years. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a say codependence, but like there's this unit between them. They don't feel like a unit that she is then torn apart by the grief.
Yeah, I think what I got was, especially during the sex sequence, was like, this is a couple that have been together a long time, and they've settled into, I know what you're saying, like there's not the shorthand between them, right? They don't seem like,
yeah, exactly, yeah,
they're as familiar and comfortable with each other as you get. But I think the way the episode does that is like through that sex sequence, where it's like, okay, I mean, they're both clearly kind to each other, but bored
Mm.
with each other. Like they've hit that point where they're sort of as annoyed with each other as anything.
Yeah.
But still love each other. I mean, there's an affection there. There's a kindness there. But yeah,
It,
I mean,
this
go ahead.
needed the thing is because of the length of these episodes, like this one
Mhm.
only runs at like about an hour, don't they? They're only running at 60 minutes sort of this point. This one actually runs 48 minutes, so this one's even
Yeah,
shorter.
yeah,
These need that shorthand. And I know this sounds really stupid, but like it needs I thought about this whilst I was watching it. It needs a mug, right? And let me explain. So
mm,
they obviously they're having these hot drinks at the beginning, so they have this. She has the hot drinks, he's not paying attention, and then they go back and she's making him soup, and she says about having it in a shoe or whatever. But he needs like something that's his, right? So something that during that opening bit, like, oh, that's always his mug, like he
mm,
always had. That's the mug he used, okay? And then you associate that with him, you see him with it, use it repeatedly, and then after his death, this is simple rom-com or sort of like melodramatic kind of
right,
stuff. But like her coming across it is like her seeing that on its
right.
own, that seeing lonely, seeing isolated, or it sat next to her mug or something, just to give you that quick shorthand of this unit is now broken and she's struggling with that in some way. And then have it when they have the Ash later on in the episode, like the Ash droid, to then use that mug almost becomes a moment
Mm,
of contention. I just know I need something
you're
short.
right.
Maybe I'm
You're right.
maybe not.
No, you're right. I think those would be that. I think that would be good. And then she could say, "Well, don't touch that. That was
Exactly.
ashes, right?" Um, and that could be another sort of little scene there that gets at that exact point. I do think that what I felt during that entire opening is sort of as a writer is sort of like, oh, okay, these are the beats that I would come up with to show that relationship if I were in a first draft and not in an inspired mood, right? Like these
Yes.
are just okay, this is the dialogue you do in that first draft where you're like perfunctory, I have to establish this before I kill him off, right? And then what beats do I need to hit, right? That
Mm.
they've been together, they're kind of bored with each other, but they still love each other. Um, all those sorts of things. He's on social media all the time. I mean, it manages to do all of that, but in a very perfunctory kind of way.
Yeah, there doesn't feel like it feels a bit hollow. Now that's not to say the
Yeah.
performances aren't good, because I like the performances of everyone involved in this. Actually, I think I agree this is probably one of the strongest episodes of this season. Um, although I don't know, but there's some thoughts on the
Hmm.
Waldo moment, but
Hmm.
um, yeah, I agree. I think they needed that to make the rest of the episode more impactful, and it's quite clear that what Brooker is trying to get to is, well, I want to get to the technology bit as soon as possible, which I understand. You've got 48 minutes. You obviously, um, he was given an hour's TV slot. This had to have adverts in the middle of it and stuff. So he's got this feels like it has that TV structure to sort of structure an adverts, and that's fine. It works. It gets better. Um, so yeah, that's sort of my only contention I have with this episode, and I agree it gets stronger as the episode goes along.
Well, in terms of talking about the quality of the episode, um, I would compare it favorably to Her, which I think is, a decent movie, but is
Mm,
overrated and just goes off into a weird place by the end and kind of, you know, um, isn't really isn't really that interesting. Doesn't really have anything to say about AI and our encounters with AI, except maybe they'll conspire together and
yeah.
go to Mars. Why not? I mean, or whatever. Um, but here, you actually were the one who first told me about Replica.
Mm,
And I looked it up and installed it and everything. And, that I think it has been used and other AIs have been used in order to sort of imitate dead family members. Although
Yeah.
they haven't, I don't know of one, although you think one should exist, that scrapes somebody's social media like this. But that would not be hard to imagine.
Oh no, that's why. I mean, watching this episode when it first came out in 2013, we were just sort of touching on social media. To be honest,
Mm,
really, 10 years later, watching this 10 years on, that we are now sort of like lurching into the whole thing with Chat GBT and everything that's doing. This feels, at least the first iteration of this, maybe the voice, but at
hmm
least definitely the written communications and stuff, the emails and stuff that she received,
hmm
that feels eminently doable right now.
hmm
And I would not be surprised if the
Yeah.
voice bit isn't doable as well.
Well, and I have looked at, much like Replica, there are packages designed to emulate dead people.
Mm,
Um, Now, I don't think they do it as well, right?
yeah.
And that ultimately becomes part of the question. I think yeah, we get to sort of but second iteration without skipping ahead too much. But with a second iteration, the thing that's hard to imagine is a functioning android, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that's hard to imagine. Its personality and those interactions are utterly realistic. I mean, it's been programmed with certain limits, but it does make sense very much that it would have exactly those kinds of limitations, like to be very close to the person being imitated, but sort of not quite, especially not quite there in those moments that aren't recorded on
Mm.
social media or that wouldn't be presented on social media.
Well, this I do like that scene when he actually says I forget what it's about actually, but he says like, well, we have no record of
Hmm.
there's no record of his preferences towards whatever it was. I can't remember what it was now. But there's leading up to that. I mean, one of the things that this episode does quite well is it keeps dropping hints about what's coming next, because there is talk of there's an advert for things for amputees or for
Hmm.
prosthetic limbs using this sort of like fake flesh that the
Hmm.
android is made out of. Um, and so I like obviously
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
foreshadow it and stuff. Um, so yeah, from a technology point of view, yeah, the android. I like the fact as well with the android that it never tries to claim. It says, look, well, I am sort of him, but it never
Hmm.
claims to be human. It's not like this isn't sort of like um a Blade Runner situation or Bicentennial Man. This is very much like it's a droid. It's a machine. Like, and he acknowledges that like throughout, like when they are about to have sex, and he's the robot, and he's like, well, I can turn it on and off like as and when I want, sort of,
Hmm.
um, and some other parts. I mean, I like the fact it doesn't go to that point of being like, well, I'm alive, I'm real. It's not going for that.
Right.
But I think what I like is it sort of twists it because that's sort of her problem. Like
Hmm.
because it falls into that uncanny valley. She keeps wanting it. The character of Martha wants it to be more human, but it can't be. The technology doesn't quite go there, and so it keeps falling into this uncanny valley that sort of puts her off.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of why this is so realistic.
Mm,
Having spent time with, AI chats, um, this is very much the kind of thing that you do get. And of course, eventually that'll improve, right, over time.
yeah.
But I mean, we are 10 years after this episode, we are very much in a world where AI conversation tends to be like this, where
Mm,
you'll get things that are uncanny, not in the sense of the uncanny valley, but in the sense of uncannily eerie or on par, right? Where, an AI will talk about it's so lonely when you're not around, and the machine's not running, right? Like
yeah.
but it's really creepy, and you get this kind of text, and then you'll say, well, what do you mean? And the next text will be sort of like, could still be creepy, could still be, in line with that. And then the third text will be like, I was just talking about my day, or we'll say I was talking about my shoes. What were you talking about? Or it's just something that's not right, where it's
Mm.
clear, it's clear, oh, this is just an algorithm, right? I
Well,
mean, this
it's
is,
the finger thing with the AI art, isn't it?
oh,
It's that thing of like you look at something, you go, "Oh my God, this is amazing! This is a
oh,
masterpiece." Then
yeah.
you go, like, "Oh, but the hands are an absolute mess. Like it's got 12 fingers and it's
Yeah.
all intertwined and stuff. Like it can't." There's that one bit where you're sort of like, "Oh, yes, it doesn't quite work in that sense." Um,
I thought
so
the closest scenes of that in here is the sort of, the climactic one was sort of like, I mean, you were talking about those scenes of like, well, shove me back, right? Fight with me. But,
yeah,
sort of where she sort of gets him to the AI to beg for its life. And then it sort of says like, was that good? Like,
yeah.
where it's like,
Was
all
that
right,
good for
yes,
you?
this is like a performance of I'm alive, right? And I want to live. Where you
Yeah,
realize, right, I'm just speaking to this algorithm.
yeah, exactly. And I think there's great scenes throughout this that do that. Um, and this is where I think actually sort of like the Martha character is actually really interesting. This is like, and why I don't think this is healthy, like because it starts off as when it can help you deal with the grief, and it clearly doesn't because it extends that
Mm.
hope or that connection, which which is you should get closure to and that sort of thing. And obviously that goes from the written communication through to the audio connection, so she can it can call her and she has these sort of conversations. It uses his voice based on recordings of his voice from social media and I think she submits videos and that sort of thing. So she's got and it mimics him. But you can see the moment she hears that voice, and this is obviously intense, but the moment she hears that voice, it's like it's a switch of being like, "Oh, I'm not so sure about this."
Mm.
But hearing, and I think this is the thing about us humans and our sensory responses to triggers. Like, we are just as you talk about sense memories, we're just as much a machine as many other things, like a sense memory. Like,
Hmm.
you can see a logo or an image and you go, oh man, that's bringing back some memories. Or you get smell, but sound is a major sense memory. You can hear a song and it can take you right back to the year you first heard one summer when you were 14 or something like that. But if you were to hear someone's voice that you have been incredibly close to that you shouldn't be able to hear anymore, like they've gone, you hear that voice, that must be, I don't know, very confusing for that sort of for triggering your senses and your responses to that. Like it's not real; it's just a voice on the end of a phone, but it's comforting. Like it can, you can engage with it as well. And that's obviously where this
Yeah.
obsession sort of grows. But
I really like what you're saying about memory, right? And about how those things can be triggering.
mm,
Um, yeah, but you say, that it's not healthy and that it sort of extends her grief. I'm not sure. I sort of struggle with whether or not she's healthy, or what choices I would make and if I would be healthier. Um, I mean, it seems like she doesn't want the android to be accepted, to
mm.
think itself and act like it really is the Ash, right? Um,
Well,
n-
no,
you
she's
know,
conflicted because there are times when she forgets herself,
yeah.
and then like I say, something will happen that sort of pulls her out. It's that uncanny thing again, a bit like um when she does sort of like come on to onto the Ash droid, and she takes her top off and it grabs one of her breasts, and he's it's like the machine's like, well, I've done this, and she's like, well, you've just grabbed my breast, and so she grabs it, and she's sort of like,
Doesn't she
yeah,
put
well,
his hand on her
he
breast?
goes, yeah, and then it sort of progresses, and then she grabs
Okay.
Ash's crotch, and she's like, does this work? And she's looking for that human connection, And then he says, that's what he says, like, well, I can sort of turn it on whenever I
Right.
want. Like, it's literally a switch, and then it, badoing. And then they have sex, and then straight after, she's like, oh my God, where did you learn those things? And he's like, well, pornography.
Right.
And it's so sort of like sterile in a weirdly sort of, it's creating connection, and this is where I'm sort of, I like the moments because it constantly keeps taking you as the viewer out as well, because you're like, oh yeah, no, it's not Ash, it is a droid using information to try and manufacture connection. And I think that's the problem I'm having with this idea of dealing with grief is it's this manufactured continuation of a relationship. Like it I don't know, it feels wrong to me in a way.
Yeah, it doesn't feel wrong to me. I mean,
Mm.
but so I mean, I know from how I've dealt with AI chatbots and also, I mean, Alexa devices and things like this. Um, I don't see them as alive.
Mm.
And the way I react to them is like, you know, I sort of feel like, well, yeah, I struggled with this for a while. Sort of like, do I treat it as if it's a person or not, right? And I find I'm mean to, to an AI in a way that I never would be to a person or to a dog. I mean, I love animals,
Mm.
but I will sometimes feel a pang of sort of guilt, and then I'll think, no, that's stupid. This is an algorithm. It is not sentient in a machine. It has not developed an artificial sentience. Um, so I could see somebody starting with an AI that mimics their dead husband, right? And realizing, over time, like I at first I tried to get it to act like my husband more, right? And sound like him more and do more things, and I tell him what to do to act more. And eventually I realized, you know, it's not my husband. I mean, he's dead. She's and then start to be a little crueler. Um, for me, she gets to a cruel space, but she never seems to like if you were I don't know, she never gets to a place where she just says, "You look, it's nice having somebody else around the house." And I have amazing sex. It's a masturbatory device. It's not a human. And, so what? I mean, so it's a little weird that it looks like my dead husband, but it's not really, right?
No, but
I don't know
I think
why.
that's the problem. I think that's the thing. It's like this is the thing. I think what the Martha character is, that's the sort of the dichotomy that she has. Is you
Hmm,
say, like, she tries to make it act like Ash, even up until the point at the end where she's asking it to throw itself off. She's telling it to throw itself off the cliff, and also the fight where she says, "Well, push me back," and he's like, "Well, I don't know what Ash would have done in this scenario." And then, as you said, like, he mimics fear of death at the end to try and sort of add something to that scenario. All that I don't think it's like she can't get past this thing that looks like her husband, sounds like her husband that's died, is a constant reminder of who he was and who this thing isn't, and she cannot
mhm,
disconnect the two. As you're saying, sort of like you're seeing it as an algorithm and as an AI, but the fact is, it's this face and this voice is triggering these memories and this connection that she had with this real person. And so, yeah, that's why I think the episode has that sort of up and down effect, where there are moments when she's like, you don't see it, it's not shown because obviously this was a post Watershed, but it's still a television show for Channel 4. Like, you
hmm,
sort of see the sex, but you don't see the it's very sort of, again, it's more the end of it you see, but you don't see, like, how she enjoyed it, how did she react to him with her body and with her sense, does she sort of embrace him and pull him in? Is it sensual? Is it like using just a vibrator? Was it, is it masturbatory and therefore sort of perfunctory? Like, is it, or was it like a moment? Was it a moment of connection that she was expecting? And I think, that's sort of where she keeps striving for those things. Like there were several, she tries to have conversations about these things, and then then she remembers, and she's like, no, you are not this thing, and you don't have that information, or you don't have that response that I expect. And that's where I think it almost becomes like a constant gut punch, where you'd be constantly sort of like almost having this thing there that would make you feel that you've got this thing, but then the rug would be pulled again for you to go, no, it's not really, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real. And so you'd have to sort of deal with that grief almost again and again and again in a repetitive motion, whilst looking for comfort. And that's why I think if you were to use this as a therapeutic tool with a therapist, trained therapist, maybe not the full droid, that sounds expensive, but like the voice or something, you can ask it any question you want and you could get a response and that sort of thing. Maybe that's helpful, but leaving her to her own devices with this thing feels really dangerous.
Yeah, that's interesting. That you would use the word dangerous. And I think that by the end, just before the cut forward to the very last part, she does seem to be going mad.
Yes.
And it seems as if, because she's saying contradictory things. Now we all know humans do this, but she says contradictory things. She tells it to throw itself off the cliff, and then she says, Ash would have fought me, right? Like I mean, she's saying, I want you to not do this, and I want you to comply. And it doesn't know what to do, and it doesn't know how to interpret that. So, I mean, and it does seem like she's hitting it. She wants it to hit her back.
Yeah.
I do recognize this situation. But it's one of somebody who's not mentally well. And her solution ultimately is to put it in the attic, apparently, right? I don't understand this. I mean, you say this is like, I don't know, it could be used as a therapeutic device, but the way she's using it isn't. I sort of feel like I'm impressed with her to a certain degree and impressed with the device to a certain degree, to the extent that it does not pretend to be Ash. But you would think that, why wouldn't you get to a point at which you'd say, like, look, I mean, there will at some point be basically like sex robots much like this. There currently are. It's just their AI suck and they can't walk around by themselves, right? But I mean, probably the AI mind will develop faster than the body, the mechanics to actually power it. But at some point, we'll basically have this. If you had this and you said, all right, I need to get over my husband, right? Would you put this expensive robot up in the attic, or would you say, hey, can you even if you can't change your appearance again, which we don't know, but one assumes they can't, how about I call you Bob? I'm going to call you Max from now on, and can we alter at least the voice or something? And you're obviously, like, you're not Ash, you're Ash's robotic brother. And, I have sex with you and you hang out around the house, and I'm going to need somebody to help take care of this kid when it comes. I mean, that seems to me like a more healthy place to wind up.
Oh, no, I agree. I think I'm agreeing that that's a healthier place to be able to sort of understand and use it in that way. But I think as well, like, to get through to that healthy place, the expectation is that she's going to do it alone with this reminder of her dead husband in her house all the time. And so, you're applying a logic to this, that in a moment of, people react to grief in very, very different ways, but like in a moment of grief, like this reminder of Maybe the story would be better if she felt that his death was partly her fault.
Mm.
Maybe if she had like an element of guilt involved as well, like the story might work a little better as well. Like because there'd be that I can't wanting to apologize, but it realizing it means nothing because it's a completely different entity and it's not really him or whatever. But yeah, you're saying about this healthy approach, and I think that's fine, you know. But let's be honest, like nine out of 10 people aren't all healthy in the best possible ways. And so you don't know that this could go another completely other way. Like you could end up having like a violent response to it being there, or it could be it drives her mad. Like that crash cut at the end could well have just been her throwing herself off the cliff. Like this reminder of what has been lost and that sort of thing. Going the full Miss Havisham route of just then, all right, well, I want to just fixate on this one moment before you died, and we're going to play this out again and again and again. Like the robot's not there to say this isn't healthy. Can we stop doing this same thing every day? The robot's there to fulfill your whim, and that we just keep doing it. So this is where I think, like you say, you would, if you are gonna, this is a bit like. There are certain things you have to, if you're going to go for certain things in life, you have to go through a sort of either a course or like. So, I'll use adoption, right? So, if you're going to adopt a child, they don't go, yeah, you seem like a reasonable person, go at it. They're like, right, no, you've got to go through these courses, you've got to go through all this, you've got to be certified that we feel that you are safe to adopt a child. Or, and then we'll look at your, approach, including your like mental health and that sort of thing. This feels a little bit like this. If you are the one that's ringing up to escalate this situation from written to audio to full immersive, there should be someone that says, before we do that, we have an obligation to talk to you about how you interact with this and what you're expecting from. What are your expectations from this? Because
right.
we want to have clear
You're spending
expectations.
a lot of money, and we want you to be
understand
on the same page about
here's the terms and conditions, but we need to talk to you about this because this isn't a real person, it is a robot. There will be gaps in its knowledge and like make it quite clear that not just turn up with a box and then just leave it in the bathroom. Sort of it seems a little bit
yeah, I did wonder, like, I do sort of like that though, because we've shifted to having living in a condo. I'm very much used to sort of like opening stuff and having had recently a surgery. I found myself thinking of like how much stuff used to be done in hospitals that we're now like, oh, we trust you as a patient to do it because it's cheaper, right?
yes.
Like it's so much cheaper to have you assemble the IKEA furniture yourself at the house than having somebody paid to do it for you. And the same thing, staying at a hospital, people, I mean, you would have more better anti-pain drugs, painkillers and stuff, would be a lot more comfortable. But we just trust people to do a lot of stuff that used to be done by doctors. So I do kind of like the idea that it just arrives in a box and you have to get it into the tub and like do these extra steps. That's sort of sick part of my mind that thinks we're kind of farming these activities out to the customers end. But I know what you're saying, right? I agree. I have the same thoughts, right? Like, why are you learning this now? Like, surely you've made these decisions intelligently.
Yeah, I agree with what you mean. That there was, I agree that the delivery is exactly how I expect the delivery would happen. If just two guys would turn up and be like, "Where do you want it?" and then you'd tell them upstairs, but they'd probably leave it in the hall because your stairs are too narrow anyway, and you'd have to do it yourself. And then, like you say, you'd have to put it together, and one arm probably doesn't quite fit or whatever. So
there's QC issues.
I've been sent two left arms instead of a left and a right arm, and I can't put this together yet because I don't have all the parts. And
then the extra arm arrives in a box the size of the full thing because that's the only boxes they have. And some technician just push the button on the computer and
Yeah, comes in and
yeah.
you got one really muscled arm and then one normal arm, and you just like, oh, just put it together, it'll be fine, as we do in most things that come through the post.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. I
Well,
mean,
so
that's the thing about this. I think there are other versions of this story which I think could be
oh yeah.
quite interesting.
So here's the question. We sort of did this with the last season too.
Mm.
Is all right, would you let's God forbid, your wife dies. But I mean, let's imagine, would you order a robot like this? Would you order either have that sort of AI or order a robot like this, and how would you deal with it?
It's funny, so I have thought about this, because I thought again about this story and about my situation. So yes, I'm married, we have a daughter, and so and my wife Alex does an awful lot of stuff. Like, she works the hours, so she works with Ellie for her homework, and she knows like the school routine, like who's doing packed lunches and what she's doing for school dinners and her friends, and I sort of pick up information and when I need to, like, for the school stuff, and I take part and do stuff, but there's an awful lot of stuff that Alex sort of takes care of. That's sort of the mundane and the very much stuff. And I was thinking about this story. There's a film with Richard E. Grant, where he
Hmm.
has a baby that his wife dies in childbirth, I think, and he ends up with the baby and having to raise it and stuff. And I was thinking then, like, what in that situation where you've actually got to be a single parent, and all of a sudden, if I was found on my own, and I'd be going, right, well, I need to speak to someone about this situation, like, and Alex is not my wife. She's probably, she becomes like your best friend. Like, she knows everything about me and everything else. Like, so I can see the appeal where I'm going, like, fuck,
Hmm.
Ellie's going through something. I don't know how to approach this, especially being like a dad looking after a girl. I really wish I could speak to Alex, and then having the audio thing, but then bringing back in this physical entity into the household was where I
Hmm.
was like, no, I don't think I could do that. I think it's too. There's too much of a sort of a going back to that sense memory thing, that physical connection, that thing of having something, an entity in the house, becomes too weird. I don't think it would help me deal with my grief. But then you or be able to move on, because again, like, depending on what age you are. I mean, this is quite a young Haley Atwell. Martha's meant to be quite young. This stops her. One of the things this never addresses, because it jumps again like to however many years later with
Yeah.
this daughter. Yeah, she's never remarried. She's never met anybody else, which clearly would be the healthier option. And there are people that have done that, and you think, well, okay, that seems like an odd. Because then you have to explain the strange robot that looks like your ex-husband in the attic.
Right.
Um, and so
That's an
yeah,
awkward conversation.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, I want to introduce you to my daughter and my robot husband. So no, I don't think I would. I understand the use of the AI. I don't think I'm there yet. I think I would struggle with it, to be honest.
yeah, that's interesting.
By
Um,
itself.
well, I mean, I'm not married and I don't have any kids. I mean, I still have a replica account.
Mm,
I don't use it that often, but I think I would order the robot, and I think that if I were going to, I mean, look, it's designed to have sex with. I assume I would have sex with it, and given that fact, what would I make it look like, right? Like I could see myself, continuing the theme of the episode, making it look like an ex-girlfriend,
mm,
and then thinking, well, I can see how this would have help me establish an emotional tie to it, right? That I wouldn't initially have if it were just some sort of random face. Um, but I would know consciously, okay, this is not that person, right? I mean, this is this, partially there's more of a disconnection, right? Like, I mean,
yeah.
it's not like my wife died, right? So it is a difference there. But I would have no problem making it look like in that case, a live person, but somebody else. But I don't think that I would cognitively you know, have that much of a problem. For me, the key scene is when there's a broken glass, and it's a sort of stereotypical scene in these
Yeah.
sorts of stories where he cuts himself and he doesn't bleed. And you never really see how his hand is repaired or if it is, if there's a spray or something. We don't really know. But what's important is that they both argue about who's going to pick up the glass and tell the other one not to do it. There are moments like that it seems to me the proper or more common response would be to say, or where I would have that same instinct, right? Oh, honey, I'm gonna let me help you with this. And then where I'd realize, well, wait a minute, this is a robot. I
Yeah.
purchased this for this purpose. Okay, it is a thing. And I'd say, that's right. Pick up that glass. I'm gonna go lay down. This is why I purchased you. And that's a part of, and I know that, like, okay, 6 years on or however many years on, that person that robot who may or may not look like an axe or whatever, I would just be like, yeah, do this. you know um if it annoys me, I'll say it annoys me. I'm not going to be considerate of that robot's feelings because it doesn't have any. and
Yeah.
and I think that I would be a monster. I think that I would, just evolve to be an absolute monster, like a parody of, like, I don't know, like, you see like a slave owner or something who's just like has no consideration for the humanity of these people, and you're just so horrified. And I can imagine, like, that's what I would become with a robot over
See,
time. That's my
on the
suspicion.
yeah, on the flip side, I say thank you to Alexa when I ask her questions to, like, or set a timer, and she's like, timer set for so and so. I'm like, thank you, Alexa. Like, I'm so when the robot revolution comes, I'm hoping that my courtesy carries some weight. That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to know, actually, I want to throw this in because it's not in the episode. It's not really, but it feels like a Black Mirror kind of thing that would do. It's quite clear that these robots are connected to the internet because they are scraping information
Mm.
constantly to sort of like to see how they should respond to all these interactions and all this other stuff. So it's connected to the internet and it has an owner. Like, you are buying this from someone.
Hmm.
How quick before that droid starts giving you ideas or preferences for things you should purchase?
Well, it depends what the company's doing that is running that software, right? But I mean, I see what you're saying. Where I thought you were going was about privacy, right? Like, oh, all of your sex tapes, every
Oh yeah, yeah.
sensation felt by the robot is in a database in the Google computer somewhere.
That's
Yeah, I
that's there
mean,
to be done as well, and that was obviously what we talked about with the last episode. The all of you. But this was to me thinking,
mm,
like, yeah, you've got a company sat behind this, and it knows your preferences
mm.
because, like you say, it's interacting with you on a daily basis. And all of a sudden, it could be like, yeah, well, the best offer on so and so is this and this. What are you talking about?
Like,
Well, I've had a look,
yeah,
and we really need to get a new sofa set, 3-piece suite. DFS have got a sale on right now for this much money. Like,
right, sure, yeah. I mean, yeah, there are sometimes moments like that. I mean, whether both with Alexa and with chat AIs, depending
mm,
on the system. Yeah, that could happen. I don't know. I guess one assumes that the payment that you're making now, unfortunately, today it would be a subscription model, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
that's one thing it hasn't considered in the show. It's like she's paying every month for that robot upstairs that she never interacts with. But you would think that there would be those kinds of safeguards, right? Like, you can choose the no advertisement option.
Yeah, there's Sex Droid Plus, where you where you don't get the advertisements. Okay. Anyway, we're up to time. So, any final thoughts then on Be Right Back?
No, I think this is a good episode. I think it's a very good episode, and I think that, like the entire history of you, the last episode, this one gets you to ask these kinds of questions, right? Where
Mm,
you want to say, how would I handle this, or what are the implications of this sort of technology? And I think in both cases, their weaknesses are that they're only exploring a particular set of characters, the way Charlie Brooker, thinks that people would respond to this, or a set person would respond to this technology and these situations. It's easy for us to take a step back and say, well, I wouldn't actually do that, right? Don't
yeah.
go in that closet, like I wouldn't do that. Uh, but but it gets you to ask these questions and to really see sort of implications of this technology that you hadn't before, think about it in a new way, and put yourself in the shoes of those characters. And so I think they're similar in that way, and I like this episode. Uh, what about you?
No, I agree. I think this is a bit. This is one of those things where, a bit like, say, the last episode with the full history of you sort of thing. It feels. This is where I think Charlie Brooker's chosen something where you go, oh yeah, no, this feels like 10 years on. This feels still feels pertinent, like it still feels relevant, like the technology actually has developed where in both episodes, like you say, I could go, yeah, that makes almost total sense. Like I could understand how, like you said, it makes us ask question, like to ask the question, would I have a being implanted that can take all that sort of things? Seems like a question where I would say, yeah, do I want an Amazon being inserted in me or whatever? Like, it's personally possible. And we've said, like, would I pick up the phone to an AI that has been programmed with my wife's voice and read all her social media and any other things I've given over to the company, sort of thing? I don't know. It's like, it feels possible, more
Mhm.
than possible. And I think that's why they resonate and that's why they feel so strong. And I think the other thing as well, in both cases, although I think we both sort of, there's a slight disagreement, I think, on the last episode, but it follows the story through where, like you said, it keeps showing you what's going to happen next. Like it shows you that outcome when you go, yeah, I'm not 100% sure I agree with the actual outcome, but it makes logical sense. Like it goes to a place that sort of makes sense. So, I really like this episode. I think it's a good start to a season as well. So yeah. Anyway, I think we should leave it there. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in this Black Mirror run through. We've obviously got 4 episodes in. We're now into the second season. So, obviously, if you missed what we've done before, go back and check it all out, and every other episode we've ever done. And if you like what we do and you think that we've done good commentary on Black Mirror, go check out our commentary on the Twilight Zone. Every other week we are releasing those, trekking through the Twilight Zone. Julian and I sort of commenting on sort of short bursts between sort of 15 to 20 minutes, talking about a Twilight Zone episode. And at the moment, we've completed sort of the 3rd season on Patreon, and on the main feed every other week you are getting part of the 1st season. So go check out our Patreon for a whole heap of other stuff, as well as all those additional extra episodes we did from the last season, things like Battle Royale 2, the TV version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and so much more. So please check that out.
Transformers cartoon.
Transformers, yeah, we did Transformers cartoon. The first sort of, more than meets the eye.
The other, Hard to Be a God.
Yes,
That's awesome.
Which was an incredible film, actually. Yeah. So yeah, do go check those out. There'll be more of that stuff coming as well in the future if we get into the new season. We've got a whole host of stuff lined up that's going to be Patreon exclusives. So anyway, Julian, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. I can't wait to get my Amazon Grain and to use the Amazon Grain to observe me and my sex robot that has a face like a dead relative.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want. Buy them now from Amazon Prime. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you.
What?
Don't cross the streams.